Let's crown one of the king of cheese, Parmigiano Reggiano. Welcome back everyone. Yes, today we're using this beautiful Parmigiano Reggiano, which is a DOP from the region of Emilia-Romagna in northern Italy. What does that mean? That means that it's been recognized as one of the top product and original from its region. How do you know you're gonna buy the right cheese? Well, you can actually see on the rind, it should say Parmigiano Reggiano. That's how you're going to know you have the real deal. Now, what are we gonna do with it? We're gonna actually use the entire cheese to make a risotto with truffle, hazelnut, and a foam made from the rind. Two things remain to be done. For us to get cooking and for you to subscribe. Let's go.
Today I'm using a 5-year-old Parmigiano Reggiano, and you will see that based on the maturation, the flavor and the color will change from amber to lighter yellows. Guarantee for some umami. Alright, so first we're going to start with our tuile. So I'm going to grab the piece of Parmigiano Reggiano and I'm going to grate it over top my microplane until I get a fluffy pile of cheese. You know what the good thing about Parmigiano Reggiano is actually a great snack. So you don't actually have to make anything, you can just break it into pieces, eat it as is, or even mix it with some olive oil and pepper and it's guaranteed to be great. See what I did there? Anyway, I'm gonna grab my baking sheet lined up with some silk pad. It could also be lined up with some parchment paper. And I'm gonna place a thick layer of cheese. It's very important, otherwise your crisps will be too thin. We'll then place it in an oven at 350 or 375 for 45 minutes until golden brown. Once we have our nice sheet, we're gonna let it cool down and we're gonna break into pieces. You could also place in a ring mold if you need something that's more precise, like a nice round shape. Obviously, we need to try it to make sure we're happy with the texture and the flavor. Okay, so everybody knows how to use the Parmesan, especially I would say it's inside. But what about the rind? Because you know what? The rind also has flavors, and that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to make a foam using the rind of the cheese. I'm going to grab the rind and I'm going to start by cutting into pieces. So be careful, it's a little harder, so make sure your knife is sharp so you're not going to put yourself in danger and cut a little finger. Once we cut our rind, I'm going to place it into a pot and I'm going to cover it with some milk. I'm using a 3.25% fat because we want to actually have something that has a little more fat, so for the foam it will make it easier down the road. I will then place my saucepan onto the heat and we're gonna let it infuse at low temperature for about 20 to 30 minutes. Alright, so next we're gonna start working on the roasted hazelnut. You could use some Piedmont hazelnut for the best, I would say, result, but they are fairly expensive. So I'm gonna grab my frying pan and I'm gonna place my hazelnut on the high heat and I'm gonna roast them for probably a minute or two. This is going to help with flavors, but also to peel them and remove that skin that can maybe be a bit unpleasant. You will then place them on some paper towel or cloth, whichever you have at home, and we're gonna roll them over themselves. So pretty much it's going to break the skin and they're gonna be a lot easier to peel, just like so. We'll then be collecting the hazelnut that doesn't have skin on them anymore, just like these ones. And then for the other one that are still, being a little reluctant, we'll keep the process going. Alright, let's check on the rind. It's been half hour and it's been sipping and really the flavor has been exchanging between the milk and the rind and it's really tasty. But now we're going to turn this into a foam. So I'm going to take my milk and I'm going to place it into a pot, straining it, make sure that the rind stay behind. Their job is done at this point. I will then add some xanthan gum as well as some Versa Whip, which is going to help me because obviously milk has no structure like cream would. So this is going to help me when I do the foam to hold its base a little bit more. Even though it's going to be very light, these chemicals are going to help me and you can find them on the internet at this point. I will then, using a hand mixer, blend them for about a minute and then I will place them into the canister of my ISI and I will load some CO2 charges. For this recipe, I've loaded 3 CO2 cartridge, but if you don't have one of these tools at home, you could also switch to solid lecithin and just make a foam by using a hand blender. It works great as well. And I do understand that it's maybe a little bit too complex, so you could also just skip that step and just keep the risotto much simpler. I just wanted to show you kind of like the maximum utilization of the cheese. Okay, next we're gonna start actually doing a risotto. And we're gonna start by grabbing an onion, which I'm going to peel, and I'm going to dice it. I wanna dice it as thin as possible, because obviously we want to make sure it's nice and sweet, and I don't want a crunchy onion when we bite into the risotto. I want the sweetness from the onion, and I want them to bring flavors and not like harshness that you could sometimes find in the onions. So I'm gonna start by doing a julienne, and then I will move it along, and I'm gonna do some very, very small dices. I will then place my onions into a bowl, and we're about just ready to start cooking our risotto. And obviously to make a risotto, we need rice. And I'm going to use arborio. Okay, so it's a more round grain, and it's actually one of my favorite to make risotto. So in a pot, I'm going to start by heating up some oil. I will then add my butter and our onions. We are going to sweat the onions gently so it will bring all its sweetness, and it's going to start to be very tender. I will season with salt and pepper and cook for another 2 to 3 minutes. I will then add my bay leaves, give it another stir, and add my rice. At this point, I'm going to cook the rice for 3 to 4 minutes, gently on low heat. It's really important. That step is going to really start open up the grain of rice, almost crack it. I will then deglaze with some white wine, and we're gonna reduce that to almost dry, at which point I'm going to add my stock. I would recommend to use a chicken stock or a veg stock. And in this case, I'm using a light veg stock. I don't want to color my risotto too much. We'll then give it a stir, and from here, we're gonna count about 17 to 18 minutes until the finish line. Something important to mention, I'm using some hot stock. Obviously, that will make this a little faster, so if it's cold, it will take more time. Every time the rice absorbs the liquid, you are going to add a little bit more until you're happy with the bite of the rice. It's gonna be still a little bit, crunchy, like have some bite, al dente. I will then start adding the flavors. I will start with lemon zest, and then I'm gonna add some beautiful Perigord truffle, adding my little French touch into that Italian dish, and give it a stir. Next, I'm going to add my Parmigiano Reggiano. So I'm going to grate a lot of the cheese, and honestly, there's no limit. You know how they say at a restaurant, tell me when. Well, I will not tell you when. You will add as much as you want, and I love cheese, especially Parmigiano Reggiano, so I'm going to be generous to say the least. I will then add some chopped chives, and I'm gonna give it a final stir. I will then bring it on to my table, and we're gonna start plating. I will switch from my spatula to my ladle. And then for one portion, I'm going to do 2 ladle. And then very important, I'm going to tap the bottom of the plate, which is gonna help to kind of like level the rice. Beautiful, isn't it? Next, I'm going to add my foam. It's going to add a rind flavor into the risotto, as well as a bit of a creaminess. Then we're gonna add our hazelnut, about 5-6 a portion. And we're gonna move on to the Parmesan crisps that honestly, they're so delicious. Put as many as you wish. We're gonna finish with a bit of olive oil, a crack of black pepper, and last but not least, we are gonna finish with more truffle that I'm going to grate up top. It's gonna be nice and fluffy and super light. And just like that, we have a delicious risotto.
And we have it. Another amazing, delicious recipe. Not French this time, Italian. Using Parmigiano Reggiano in different texture. We used the rind for the foam. We also made some crisps with the Parmigiano, and obviously fresh in the risotto, as well as some truffle and some hazelnut. If you enjoyed this recipe, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next episode. And now I'm going to try it.